All right, well, thank you all so much for being here this afternoon. It's great to see so many people. My name is Dr. Stephen Skultety. I'm a member of the faculty here at the University of Mississippi, where I serve as director of the Declaration of Independence Center for the Study of American Freedom. The mission of the Declaration Center is to ensure that students and faculty and members of the community have an opportunity to study American freedom in a careful and academic way. Now, a lot of times when I tell people that I'm the director of the Declaration of Independence Center for the Study of American Freedom, they can't believe it. They're shocked that there would be a center devoted to studying American freedom. And whenever they express surprise at this, I think in part they assume that the reason they've never heard of the center before is that the center is designed to come out and criticize or critique or get involved in this or that sort of problem. But fundamentally, the Declaration Center has always been and is and will continue to be motivated by a positive vision. The Declaration Center believes that American freedom is so important and of such value that we need to spend time and energy giving it our full attention. Now, even though it might be somewhat unique to have a center studying freedom and American freedom, nevertheless, the center is doing the same kind of thing that we see so many other academic centers doing. Let me give you an example. Take the idea of Southern culture. People find the idea of Southern culture fascinating. It's intrinsically interesting. And for those of us who live in this region, studying Southern culture helps us find meaning in our own lives. And moreover, when you start thinking carefully about Southern culture, you realize that that's very complicated. It's not a simple idea. It admits of different perspectives and different inputs. Well, so too with American freedom. Think about it. American freedom is something that's intrinsically interesting. And it's also something which, when we think about it, when we ponder it, it helps us give meaning to our own lives. It helps us make sense of ourselves as American citizens. And moreover, the more you think about American freedom, you realize that this too is no simple concept. This is no easy idea. In fact, I really think that that's what Benjamin Franklin meant when he emerged from the Constitutional Convention. And someone asked him, "So what kind of government did you come up with in there?" And he replied, his quip was, "A republic, if you can keep it." And now by that, he didn't just mean that a republic takes a lot of work. I think what he meant is that understanding how a people can be free and self-governing is actually a very difficult thing to understand. It takes a lot of wisdom. It takes a lot of insight. It takes a lot of reflection to understand how a people can be free. And I think Benjamin Franklin was right. I mean, how is it that each of us can have freedom and be independent from one another and yet be together in some kind of community? How is it that all of us can live lives of ordered liberty? That's a hard question. That deserves our attention. That deserves our thought. And again, how can we as a self-governing people devote ourselves to both liberty and justice for all? That's something we should all be carefully thinking about. Now, the University of Mississippi has done a wonderful job ensuring that its students and its faculty and the community think carefully about the nature of justice, and we celebrate those who have acted with such grace and courage to make this university and our state a more just place. The Declaration Center will ensure that we're also thinking about freedom and that we're taking time to celebrate those who work so hard to fight for our freedom and our independence. Now, how will the Declaration Center be doing this? What sort of activities is the Declaration Center going to be undertaking? First and foremost, I'm excited to say that the University of Mississippi now offers an academic Freedom Studies minor. And as part of that Freedom Studies minor, students can take specific classes devoted to different aspects of freedom. They can explore freedom in economics, liberty and constitutionalism, different philosophical ideas of ordered liberty, and then the history of the fight for freedom and liberty and independence. In addition to those academic opportunities, the Declaration Center is going to work hard to link talented students to new sorts of opportunities. We want to link students with fellowships and internships and different kinds of scholarships. In fact, the Declaration Center itself will now be offering a $10,000 Freedom Studies scholarship available to talented undergraduate students. The Declaration Center is now forming faculty research groups and sponsoring research projects. And finally, the Declaration Center will be putting on public events and lectures just like this one. And that is only the beginning. This first year, I've brought together a talented team of people who are helping me get operations going here, up and going here at the University of Mississippi campus. But in future years, the Declaration Center will be expanding to institutions of higher learning across this state. It's not only people at Ole Miss who deserve to study freedom, but it's rather all Mississippians. Now, before I turn to the next part of the program, I do want to take this opportunity just to say thank you to a number of people who made this event possible. First of all, just a thank you to Senator Tim Scott for our coming here. Special thanks to Senator Wicker for making this event possible. I want to thank Chancellor Boyce for your support. And I'd also like to give special thanks to a number of people in the audience. First, I'd like to say a public thank you to Representative Trey Lamar. He played a crucial role in helping the Declaration Center get funding this year, and I deeply am thankful for his efforts. I'm also incredibly thankful to the Speaker of the House, Philip Gunn. The Speaker also made a commitment that really gave the Declaration Center an opportunity to start this year in a big way. And finally, I want to thank publicly one more person. I still haven't figured out whether he's a human being or a tornado or some kind of combination of the two. But I do know that he is a patriot. I do know that he believes strongly in the mission of the Declaration Center. And I also know from spending time with him these 2 years that he's a good friend. And so I want to thank our mutual friend, Mr. Barry Canada, for all his help and support. And with that, I'd like to invite to the podium the Chancellor of the University of Mississippi, Dr. Glenn Boyce.
Don't you absolutely love Stephen's passion? It's amazing, isn't it? Something special, isn't it? On behalf of the University of Mississippi, it's my pleasure to welcome you, and what a great hour we have in store. Let me express to Dr. Skultety, Director of our Declaration of Independence Center for the Study of American Freedom. Stephen is pioneering opportunities on our campus that have never been seen before. Today's program, his leadership, this conversation, I'm sure will be enlightening and informative for all of us. The mission of the Declaration of Center, as he's already described, is aligned with our university commitment to doing one thing that we do best at the University of Mississippi. And ladies and gentlemen, people ask me this all the time. Chancellor, you got to give it to me in one sentence. What do you do best? You've heard it. If you haven't, you're going to hear it now. We build leaders at this university. That's what we do. We build leaders. They're everywhere. They're everywhere. Senator Scott, thank you. We appreciate you deeply for joining us. We're honored and grateful for your visit and the time you've offered to our students and the university community. Today's audience is going to be fortunate to learn from you and to consider your perspectives on freedom, democracy, civics, and America's future. Perspective gained through nearly 3 decades in public service at the local, state, and federal levels. We want you to know how much we appreciate that service, too. It's just amazing. Thank you. Additionally, we're joined by more than 50 staff representatives from our federal delegation in D.C., and it's a privilege to welcome them to campus for a few days, and we're glad to have an opportunity to learn from them about our programs, to work through what we can do better, and how that they can support our faculty, staff, and students. If you're here and you're one of the staffers, would you please stand up? Senators, no offense, but I told you Washington was being run by young people. It's now my pleasure, and it's my deep pleasure, to introduce my friend, Senator Roger Wicker. Senator Roger Wicker has served in the U.S. Senate since 2007 and is Mississippi's senior senator. His advocacy on behalf of the university has benefited academic programs, facilities, and research across our entire institution. A native of Pontotoc, Senator Wicker is a 2-time Ole Miss grad with a bachelor's and law degrees. Senator Wicker holds many esteemed positions in Congress. As ranking member of the Senate Armed Services Committee, he is one of America's most influential leaders on national defense. He is a senior member and former chairman of the Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation. He is responsible for making lasting changes in science and technology for Mississippi and our nation. He also serves on the Environment and Public Works Committee, the Rules and Administration Committee, and the Commission on Security and Cooperation in Europe. To put it plainly, he is incredibly busy, and he is an amazing leader. Senator Wicker, we're honored to have you here and to join us today. We're grateful for your support, your love of this university, your advocacy for this university. Please join me in welcoming Senator Roger Wicker.
Well, thank you. We are making history today in Oxford, Mississippi. And I offer my heartfelt thanks to Chancellor Boyce and to Dr. Stephen Skultety for their vision and leadership and for their determination and courage which have led us to this moment. That it would take courage to establish a minor in American Declaration of Independence study is a testimony to the importance of this event. And I'm honored to introduce my colleague, Tim Scott. Our special guest today knows what it's like to create opportunity. He created jobs as a small business person in Charleston, South Carolina. He's been a public servant at the local and state levels. He is a Christian lay speaker. He's a leader in our Senate prayer breakfast. Tim Scott's faith is genuine and evident and humble, and he inspires others with his words and his deeds. Tim Scott was an athlete in high school and in college, and he now brings that team spirit and energy to his work on behalf of the people of South Carolina. And he's a candidate for the presidency in the 2024 presidential nomination. But Tim Scott Tim is here today because he believes in the principles of the Declaration of Independence. He still believes in the dream of our founders. He believes that dream is still relevant, even essential today. He does not just believe these principles because he read them in a book. He believes them because they changed his life. In high school, a mentor taught Tim these principles. They gave him the purpose he needed to raise his grades, to become a student leader, and to develop a remarkable life mission to affect the lives of 1 billion people in a positive way. Through his public service, he's well on his way to achieving that goal. We are here today to celebrate the freedom enshrined in our founding documents. The Great Seal, adopted in 1787, reads in part, Novus Ordo Seclorum, the new order of the age. How could these people have dreamed such a thing? We might take that freedom for granted today, but when our founding documents were written, the idea was revolutionary. And each generation since that first one has passed the baton of freedom to the next. And that freedom has spread to more U.S. citizens and to more countries worldwide. That's why a center like this, Dr. Skultety, is so important. Ronald Reagan said, freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. Every generation must learn the principles anew. Senator Tim Scott knows that, and he works every day to make that freedom available to more of our countrymen and to people around the world, to everyone. Our guest today proclaims that America is already brimming with opportunity. We hear him use that word, opportunity, a lot because he's laser focused on what he calls the opportunity agenda. As he says, our founding fathers had incredible foresight. They knew free markets were essential to economic progress. Unlike so many places around the world, in the United States, anyone can climb the economic ladder. That conviction informs Senator Tim Scott's work in Washington. He reminds us that one of the primary jobs of the federal government is to make sure these kinds of opportunities exist for everyone. Senator Scott and I share that vision. When people are given opportunity, they do incredible things. Senator Scott testifies that the principles of our nation, freedom, equality under the law, and justice, changed his life. He also reminds us that they changed our country. The founders set up a system that could get closer to perfect over time. Tim says there are two ways to view history. One, in the negatives, to focus on the failings of the past. Indeed, we must be honest about our failings, or we're doomed to repeat them. Indeed, Senator Scott's leadership after the horrific 2015 Mother Emanuel Church massacre helped his state and our nation feel the grief and righteous anger that tragedy inspired. I was on the floor of the Senate that day listening to him. Even as Tim Scott recognizes that pain, he pushes us also to look at how far we've come and how far we can go. Senator Scott sees a bright future for our country, and that future is possible if we choose to live by the principles of our founding documents in our time and place. At this new center, students will crack open old books, or perhaps they'll click on those books and read about the principles conceived of centuries ago. And then they'll be asked to explore whether these concepts are simply old thoughts that belong on a dusty bookshelf. It is my hope that many graduates in this field of study will conclude that these unique founding principles are timeless, even essential, and that the freedom set forth by our founders can result in an even stronger American future. And so, ladies and gentlemen, my fellow Mississippians, my fellow Americans, please join me in giving a warm Mississippi welcome to my friend and colleague, U.S. Senator Tim Scott.
Thank you. Hey, Mrs. Wicker. It's always good to see Roger's better half with us today. God bless Mrs. Wicker.
Well, so my first question It's about your mom.
Oh.
I've heard she wanted you to be a preacher.
She did.
Yeah, and I was wondering, first of all, when did she want that for you? And what does she think now?
Let us pray for my mama. That's what she thinks now. She's very clear that in so many ways. I think it probably started when I was 8 or 9 years old. My mother really thought I talked too much, and she said you had a gift for gab, and there are only two things that you do with the gift for gab. Number one is to become a politician, and that was like, I rebuke you in Jesus' name. And the other one is to become a preacher. She really felt like that would be an opportunity for me to really help people and to do what I love doing, which is talking about the Lord. And it seemed to be such a perfect fit. Even at 8, 9, 10 years old, I became a Christian at 11 and recommitted my life when I was on a football scholarship at Presbyterian College at an FCA meeting. And it's just always been a part of what I thought would be my future. And so my mother really encouraged me. And finally, I went to a seminary. And unfortunately, the good Lord said, nah, you're not that good. Please leave. So it just didn't work out for me at the end of the day. But a true story, my pastor, I had a chance with my pastor. I preached at my church one Wednesday night. And he says, I really think the Lord has a call for you in politics. I was like, man, when you're getting fired from your own church before you even get hired, it's a clear sign that you're not supposed to be a pastor. But I still love the Word. I love the Lord, and I love what the Word does for freedom. It is the essence of being set free. It's John 8, 31, 32, where you have to first abide in the Word. And if you abide in it, once you've abided in the Word, the truth will set you free. Because you will know the truth once you've abided in the Word. And for me, from a public servant, my mother really did lay that foundation of being the matriarch spiritually in our family, so that there would be a vision that was cast for my future and that I could run into that vision. And our nation and our founding fathers did the same thing for this nation, and it spans, that vision continues to expand 250 years later.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's so clear, that religion plays such a key part of your identity.
Yes.
In terms of who you are. And it often seems to me that in the contemporary world, a lot of people just aren't that interested in what religious view someone has or what philosophical view they have, but instead they're more interested in sort of different sociological categories, maybe your race or your gender, your class. And I wonder, do you think that Americans are just becoming not just less religious, but maybe just less interested in religion? How do you think religion plays in people's conception of who they are now compared to in the past?
Great question.
I would say that people are, according to most of the studies I've seen recently, people are very spiritual, but not focused on organized religion as much. I think the truth is that we are now more tribal than we've ever been in the past, that we find ourselves and we are accepted by our tribe, whether it's being black or being white or being a man or being a woman or being rich or where do you live. There's lots of tribes. The one thing about faith that is so important to the path of freedom is faith actually connects us together with a universal truth. Our tribes really reflect our experience, where our faith reflects something deeper and more powerful and frankly more accurate. In today's America, part of the chaos that we're experiencing is because we are trying to make our experiences into truth. You can have your experience and I can have my experience, but neither one might be the truth. And so having a nation and a world that is consumed with immediate gratification, looking in the mirror for your solutions, and then having an echo chamber that reinforces the view that you saw in the mirror is part of the reasons why our nation is experiencing over 100,000 overdoses. It's part of the reason why our nation is experiencing high levels of mental instability. Anytime man finds the conclusion, anytime man draws the conclusion that the most powerful force on the planet is the person in the mirror, chances are really good
that's going to lead to running into a ditch.
In that kind of world, what do you think the future of religious liberty is? I mean, I guess, do you worry, based on things you've seen, that if people don't take religion as seriously, then it's not as big of a deal not to give people religious liberty? You're not taking that big of a thing away from them. So I guess, what do you see as the future of religious liberty in our country?
I think we will see some of the greatest assaults on religious liberty than we've ever seen in the history of our country. Without any question, we're seeing it today around the world, but we're seeing a lot of it at home as well. People want to challenge whether or not your faith should be a part of the public forum. They forget the fact that our founding fathers founded this nation upon the rock of Judeo-Christian ethos. It is that rock that allows this nation to be the city on the hill. When people look for a value proposition over the course of our history, they always come back to America. Today, we're seeing challenged in the courts this notion of religious freedom, of religious liberty. The assault is withering. And frankly, you couple the assault with the indoctrination of our kids from kindergarten through college. I'm not surprised that America, in some parts, are retreating from their faith, retreating from hard work, retreating from character, because embedded in our faith is this notion of hard work. Embedded in our faith is this notion that the most important single unit in our nation isn't the government. It's the family. And the more we stray away from these universal truths, the more chaos, the more pain, and the more instability we see. But there seems to be an appetite for more dysfunction as we wander away from that universal truth or that tap root of what makes America unique on earth.
Well, I wanted to ask you about a lot of the hard work and a lot of the perseverance that you had to go through when you were the owner of a small business early on. I know in your book, you talk about what a struggle it was, how much red tape you had to work through, just what a grind it was to make that small business successful. And as a senator, obviously, you get to interact with some of the most successful companies and corporations in the world. My next question for you is, now that you've seen sort of free markets, both from the perspective of a small business owner, as well as a senator who sees sort of free markets on a larger stage, I guess, what have you learned in that process? What do you know now about capitalism and free markets that maybe you didn't when you were a small business owner?
Well, when you're starting a small business, I started my small business for two reasons. Number one, my first pursuit of freedom was freedom from poverty. Can I get an amen? Anybody ever had that sense there? Only about 17% of y'all. So let me just talk to that 17% real quick here. So for me, I'm sorry I stood up, and all the cameras have to adjust, but that's just the way I work. Mama still wants a preacher, so I'm kind of give her a little act right now. So, for me, pursuing my small business was one of the most important points of inflection in my life. The theory that American capitalism, American free enterprise could work for a kid growing up in a single-parent household, mired in poverty, living in an inner city, that there was another alternative to athletics to find economic freedom. And the mentor that we talked about, John Moniz, the Chick-fil-A operator who taught me that having a job would be good, but creating jobs would be better, it started to germinate in my soul. And as it did so, I started pursuing my business. But when you're poor, I got paid $1,200 a month. I worked 95-hour weeks. I signed the front of the paycheck for my employees, but not always the back of the paycheck for myself. Any small businesses understand that? All right, this is good. 7 of y'all, this is great. They're working with me. And so one of the things I learned going into business was the importance of being everything. When you're a small business owner, you're the legal department, you're the human resource department, you're the sales and marketing department, you're the research and development department, you're the CEO and the janitor. So you get to do it all. And doing that, though, was really important to understanding the miracle of free markets. As a senator, I understand the pain and the misery and the suffering brought about by a large group of people who put pages together, called bureaucrats, and they lift it up, and they put it on the shoulders of a business person, and then they say, go compete. It's really hard to compete against the competition and your government. And one of the things that small businesses and large corporations need in common is certainty and predictability. One of the things that gets in the way of capital formation is the red tape that comes from the government. Trying to protect and insulate our free market economy cost us tremendously in innovation and creativity and imagination. Setting the imagination free is the way that we allow entrepreneurs to come into some of the darkest corridors economically of our country. By doing so, we set more captives free when we give more entrepreneurs access to the marketplace. But the more the government comes in to insulate the market, the more red tape, the more those pages we put in the books, we put on the back of an entrepreneur, and then we take the cash away through new capital standards, and that makes it even more difficult to find access to cash. That combination is suffocating for a small business. So removing some of that burden, some of the unnecessary burden, setting the rules of the road, and then getting the government out of the way is the fastest path to experiencing economic freedom. So seeing it from both the small business owners starting and the senator who's now the leading member of the banking committee, talking to large corporations and all the alphabet soup in Washington, putting all that together helps me cast a vision for the future of our economic markets.
Yeah. I mean, it is interesting. It's really interesting how in your book, when you talk about fighting the red tape and the struggles of dealing with that, the conclusion you reach isn't that, well, government then should just do nothing.
No.
And you have some really interesting proposals in terms of creating opportunity zones.
Yes.
And I wonder if you could just talk a little bit more about that. I mean, so you don't think government should be completely out of there.
No.
Government needs to be involved, but government needs to be involved in a way that ends up being productive and creative.
Yes.
And so I guess for someone who might be like skeptical of whether government could do that, how do you think about that? What is the role, what is the constructive and productive role of government in producing something like an economic opportunity zone?
Yeah, so two things that are really important in this conversation. Number one is to recognize that government never creates jobs, period. Government may cost you jobs, but they don't create jobs. But government can create the soil conditions for job creation. Opportunity zones that I created is an example of those soil conditions. I'm a big believer that if government can have a light touch, set the rules of the road, make sure that the playing field is as level as humanly possible, and then take a step back and be an umpire. Don't pick winners and losers, but just be an umpire. You'll get the best production for the American people. Opportunity zones that I designed was around that notion of a light touch from government. And so what I basically said was, there are areas of our country that are economically hard hit. Can we induce capital or attract capital into the hardest hit economic areas of the nation? My answer was yes. How do you do that? Well, my design was to take the capital gains tax and lower the amount of that burden if investors would make a long-term 5 to 7 year investment in some of the hardest hit economic areas. By doing so, you'll have more activity, you'll have more job creation, and you'll have a great return for the investor and more importantly for the community. Having grown up in those communities that are now designated as opportunity zones, I knew that there was a lot of talent that would never see the light of day if the capitalists didn't have the right incentive to come into those communities. As a result of that, we've seen $75 billion invested into over 9,000 opportunity zones across the country, and not a single of those dollars was your tax dollars. Because ultimately, what I believed was that as a kid who grew up in poverty, the one thing that we always had was a government something, a government program, or a government handout, a government subsidy. And the only thing I could recognize as a result of all of that, help. If the government defines that as help, please help us less. We don't need that kind of help. But what I did realize was this, if you could bring the private sector into those communities and create jobs and rehabilitate neighborhoods without significant gentrification, then the people who are there become primary beneficiaries of the activity. And if we created the capital gains incentive, we could see the people, the entrepreneurs, the capitalists, create new communities. And the other thing I decided was the government that is farthest away from the people should have the least to say about how to designate those zones. So people like me in Washington should just shut up and sit down, except for right now. And so I designed a program where the governor's designated in the states and not me. That one decision allowed them to capture in their own states the hardest hit economic areas, whether it's the rural parts of states or the inner city parts of the states, and most governors did both. And as a result, wages went up 8% within the zones, while wages outside the zones were growing around 3%. Property values went up 20%, which closes the wealth gap because 60% of the people in the zones own their own property. That combination is how we bring America together. Instead of trying to divide the country by tribes, why not unite the country through opportunity?
Mm-hmm. Actually, it's part of a bigger theme too. I mean, just like it can seem inappropriate for sort of elites in Washington to pick economic winners and losers.
Yes.
You know, another theme in your book that's very interesting is when people in elite positions have specific roles that they believe different people ought to play. And you talk about in your book how throughout your life, many people have wanted you to serve very specific roles. Since you're African American,
Yes.
since you're a male, since you're and my question for you is,
I just realized I'm black. I'm black.
that's right. But I wonder, do you,
Sorry. My staff's over there.
It's a problem.
This is my black and my white staffer. They've heard this before. My bad, fellas. My bad. They're both bald though, so I
That's
love.
right.
We got this going on. Okay, good. Yes, sir.
Well, no. And so my question is that something you've noticed that's just been a constant through your entire life?
Yes.
And because I've wondered too if maybe in our contemporary world, as Americans, we're doing that to each other more and more and more, where people in elite positions are kind of telling other people the roles they should play, not just about race, but in other ways as well. And so I'm just wondering, is it a constant or is it getting worse in your mind?
I think it's getting worse. Yeah. It has been a constant throughout my life, but it's getting worse. And I'll tell you that I think it's bad for the psyche of America to say because I'm black and a dude, I have to fill these boxes. Now, I think, and this is just the way I look at it, and I could be wrong, but this is how I see the world. I think Jeremiah 1:5 says that before we were in our mother's womb, the Lord made us and he gave us a purpose. So I think every single characteristic about me, save the last 20 pounds that I gained by eating ice cream, the rest of me, that's funnier than y'all are laughing. But anyways, the rest of me was specifically designed by the Lord. So being black is one of the characteristics God wanted me to have to serve people with. And there is a challenge that comes with being black that is headwinds at times, and there's a benefit from being black that comes with opportunity at the same time. And sometimes we look at only one side of the coin, and we should look at both sides of the coin. But undeniably, my goal in life isn't to be the black guy, fill in the blank. I don't want to be the black conservative. Right. I don't want to be the black Southerner. I want to be Tim Scott, who happens to be black. Because I believe that my ultimate definition, my ultimate value proposition is a child of the Most High God. From that, it is from that that I identify myself. And the more powerful people tell little kids that if you are black, then this is who you are, and if you are white, this is who you are. How about let us follow the direction that we find in Proverbs, that we should train every child uniquely and specifically to the skill set we see within that child. And assume that really good things will happen, as opposed to saying, I'm supposed to join the Congressional Black Caucus because I happen to be black. Well, the Congressional Black Caucus, they are black. I haven't noticed that part. But they're all very, very, well, most of them are very, very progressive and liberal. So when I walk in the room, they're going to like, shh, we'll have the real conversation once he leaves. I'm doing them a favor by not joining the caucus, so they should be happy, right? And so for me, I think if we just allow ourselves to form natural groups of influence and natural groups that we associate with based on our value system, not from the outside in, but from the inside out. And once again, 1 Samuel 16:7 reminds us that man judges on the outside, but God judges the heart. And if I understand that, it's good information. I should know that man judges on the outside. I should know that people will make a determination by what they see before I open my mouth. That is good, and sometimes that is bad, but it's also the truth. But the more you know someone, the more likely you are to make the determination based on your relationship with that person. And that's when the true miracle of our country reveals itself. No matter where you live, and as a guy who grew up here in the deep South in South Carolina, I can tell you that the more intimate the relationship, the walls that separate us come down. Taking the time to know someone is a part of the pursuit of liberty and freedom. It is why I think our Declaration of Independence is the marvel of the world. Our birth certificate says that you and I were created by the Lord with inalienable rights. That is unique on the planet. Countries aren't founded upon the precept that we are equal. And so when we miss that, we miss the value proposition that America has for the world and that we as individuals have for each other. Even if we are part of the American family, there's something unique and specific about what we can contribute to the flourishing of our human family, and specifically our American family.
Yeah, in your book, you talk very eloquently about how, for us to reach that point, America as a society needs to reach a point where there's redemption.
Yes.
Where redemption is offered. And you say in the book, if we don't reach the point of being willing to offer redemption, our liberties are at stake without that. And so my next question for you is, during your time in the Senate and during your time as a successful politician, are you more optimistic now that America is getting closer and closer to reaching a point where we'll have redemption for terrible sins and the sin of slavery in the South and in America? Or do you look back at your political career and you say, we're just as far from reaching that point as when you first got involved in politics?
The quick answer is that we are so much closer than we've ever been. But there's an old saying by a guy named Jim Rohn, who was a business philosopher, who said, all good will be attacked, and not to think so is to be naive. The closer we get to fulfilling the promise of redemption as a society, the stronger the forces become to separate us again. There is something evil in the world that is undeniable, and it oftentimes manifests itself in separating people. I don't understand it. Jeremiah 17:9 says that there is something that lurks in the heart that is wicked. We were talking before we got out here, Genesis 1 or 2, I can't remember what it is, but it says that God gave us like dominion over the birds of the air and the fish of the sea and the cattle that roam. We always want more. So we want dominion over each other. That is a part of this thing that lurks in our heart that is just part of the darkness of our original sin, period. And so as a country, we keep looking in the mirror and grappling with ourselves, and we keep making progress. And the progress is undeniable. Listen, as we've already recognized I'm a black dude from South Carolina, in Charleston, South Carolina, where the Civil War started.
Right.
Born in poverty, single-parent household. I nearly failed out of high school. I failed civics, the study of politics. That tells me God has a sense of humor. I ran for Congress against the son of the most popular governor of our state at the time, a guy named Carroll Campbell Jr. His son was running for Congress. The other guy running for Congress was this guy named, have y'all ever heard of y'all probably don't know this, y'all don't know South Carolina history, but there's a guy named Strom Thurmond who served for a little while in office. I ran against his son. And everybody said, you know you have no chance of winning that race. And I said, I believe that people will make a decision based on the content of my character, not the color of my skin. And I won that race 68-32, which reflects more on South Carolinians' evolution than it does on an individual candidate. I'd like to say it was all about me, but I would be lying to you.
Yeah.
Our state in the 1st Congressional District made a decision, despite the power of the past, we were looking for an individual to lead us into the future based on certain core principles and characteristics. If I can win a race where the Civil War started, all things are possible, number one. But number two, I now live in a community that I could not live in 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Because we keep evolving as a nation. And here's the hard part. Don't ever forget to go back and tell the story. Because too often today, we have figured out that monetizing conflict on all the cable news networks is very, very lucrative. That means that we are 24/7 in an echo chamber of division. And people are making a lot of money off of our division. But when I walk into neighborhoods, when I fly into Iowa or New Hampshire, really white states, I can tell you, the people treat me like I'm one of their own. Why? Because people are interested in change. Now, they may not vote for me, but the one thing I can tell you is that they listen. And they listen to all the candidates. That's why America is the most remarkable experiment on the planet. And if we don't get our act together from the top, where the elites try to indoctrinate us instead of educating us, we'll lose the secret sauce. And if we lose it, the world has lost it.
Well, speaking of education, I'd like to, my final question to you will be sort of where I began in my introductory remarks. If you could go back to school and learn anything about the history of freedom, the meaning of freedom, what would you go back and study? What would you go back and read more about? What part of the story of American freedom is something that you walk around wishing you knew more about and would like to study more?
You know, that's a great question. This doctor is he's pretty smart. Y'all done good, as we say in the South. Y'all done real good. Honestly, I think what I'd want to study is men and women who take the calculated risk. Let me put some skin on that, because I hadn't thought about this until you literally asked that question. I think back to Abraham Lincoln in his second inaugural address. Civil War is raging. He has to be one depressed dude.
Yeah.
His stated purpose is to make sure that the nation is unified. That's what he wanted more than everything else. But his soul and his mission was to set captives free. And these two seem to be in such different corners. And it seems like he was wrestling with this notion that would every drop drawn from a slave's body by a lash be requited by the sword on the battlefield? And would God Almighty, the God of love and justice, allow this war to tarry? To have the courage to get up every day after being on his knees to ask the question, how do I set captives free and keep the one nation under God, indivisible? Taking the calculated risk that was possible inspires me. I think of Frederick Douglass. And instead of turning his back on the Constitution of the United States, he said, it is because of the Constitution of the United States that I will fight for the freedom that every man, every woman deserves, because that Constitution should not be ignored, but we should live up to the fullness of that Constitution. And I think about my mama, a woman struggling every day, who believed that somehow, some way, this country would afford her child an opportunity to live the full American dream. A woman who grew up with colored water fountains and white ones. A woman who believed that you can be a victim or you can be victorious, but you can't be both. A woman who worked 16 hours a day as just a nurse's aide for a slightly more than minimum wage, who held on to two basic principles: that prayer was the key and faith could unlock impossible doors. And to see her take the calculated risk of working overtime so that both of her sons would have the picture that there's dignity in all work. And if you keep working and you keep praying, the breakthrough will come. That's a risk. It's hard to understand, but it's undeniable, the benefit brought to me, my brother, and hopefully to the nation I get to serve.
Well, thank you all so much for coming. Thank you, Senator Scott, for being here. Please go online to www.independence.edu, to the Declaration Center website, where you can read about everything we're trying to accomplish with the Declaration Center. Thank you again for being here, and thanks to Tim Scott once again. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for using the book.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate it. God bless America.